Listen to us. I hope.
Που ήρθατε να μας ακούσετε.
I'm Alexandra Buchler, and I represent Literature Across Frontiers, an organization based in the UK, in Wales, and also a network, European network called NLIT, which is a network of European organizations that promote their national literature and provide funding for its translation. And we have 4 speakers here from 4 different countries. One of them shares the same country as I do, so we had a kind of conversation to start with about the fact that this panel is about translations or literature traveling across the EU. Well, we're not in the EU, as everyone knows, and sadly so. And so we will also address that topic, what kind of barriers it may present, and I'll ask actually James, because he is a publisher based in the UK. So we have Laure Pécher. We were discussing how to pronounce it properly. And Laure is an agent based in Paris. And her other half, Pierre Astier, is also very well known. And she will tell us a little bit about what the agency does. You represent authors from all around the world, and so I will ask you in a minute to talk about that and about what your perspective on what happens in Europe, because you deal with a lot of publishers in Europe, and because you're based in France, you will also tell us a bit about the translation trends in France. James Tukey Peirini, publishing, that's a publishing house, a kind of boutique, small publishing house run by 2 people. And again, you will give us your perspective on what that means for someone who actually, or for a publisher who actually focuses on publishing translations, translated fiction. Jacoba Kassir is based in the Netherlands and works for an independent publisher, but a publisher that's quite large, and so she stands out. She's not 2 people; they have 80 people working in that group. And finally, we have Ricardo Lopez from Madrid. He again runs with his partner a small boutique, very interesting publishing house, which almost gives you the impression that, you know, here are 2 people who do something they absolutely love, and they have the privilege of really picking up titles that they find interesting, and they hope that their readers will find interesting. So looking at the, and I suppose that goes for Peirini as well, that looking at the catalogue, it's not that many books a year, but it's very kind of eclectic, very, very interesting, really very carefully selected. So let's start with Laure. We thought we would look at issues such as support for translation. Is translation, because of the support that's available in terms of grants, and the members of NLIT actually distribute about 10 million euros, and not every organization is in that network. So it's quite substantial support that is available. Also, the EU provides support, which we don't have in the UK access to. We thought we would also look at readership. Who are the readers? Has readership of translated literature grown or declined or stayed stable? And what the trends, what is being published, from where? Has that changed recently? So, Laure, can we start with you? And I don't know if do you want to take this microphone, or, yeah. And we'll allow at the end time for Q&A. So give us your perspective, which I think is very interesting, on how you see the European space now in terms of translations traveling across Europe,
Okay.
if that can be discussed in a short while. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning. First, I just want to say a few words saying that I'm very happy to be here and to thank the Thessaloniki Book Fair. The first time I've been in Greece, it was 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and it was in Thessaloniki, and I never went back since. So it's a great opportunity to be here and to see how the city has changed in 40 years. And probably Europe and the publishing market has changed also in 40 years, and maybe we can say a few words about that. I think we have very different trends in Europe, and probably some are very positive, other one is probably a bit more difficult. But the positive trend is, as you see, Alexandra, that it has never been easier to translate, to publish, to make works, authors, novels circulating inside Europe. We have a lot of tools, we have grants, we have high qualified professionals, we have great literary translators, which is very important. We have book fairs, fellowship international program like this program, very useful for all of us, I think. So it has never been easier to do it. That's the first trend, very positive trend. And the other one is probably that the readers are more open and the market is more open to other foreign literature than written in English. Until now, it was most of the translated literature was translated from English. And the other languages where it was a bit more difficult, especially for literature from Central Europe or East Europe. And since a few years, we see that there is a growing interest for literature from everywhere. And if we talk a bit later about France, the situation in France, I have some data to share about this trend, and that's very positive. But on the other way, we are facing some difficulties because with such facilities to make works traveling, we are facing an overproduction of works, of novels, it's very difficult for the publishers to make a selection, and each fair like this one, they all go back home with many books to read, and I don't know how they do actually to read them all, because they do, but that's very hard to select and to choose. And the other thing is that the readership is, I think, getting down everywhere, especially for literary production. And that's another problem we can face, the overproduction and a readership which is going a bit down. I don't know.
Okay. Hello, I'm James. So Pyrini, which I have been running now for 3 years, was founded in 2009 with a very specific aim. Not founded by me, I was still at school then, but founded by Maika Ziervogel, who ran it for 10 years before me. And she founded it with a very specific aim to publish European literature, which at the time, compared with the rest of Europe, the UK just didn't have the same kind of pipeline of European literature being given to readers. So she found it with that very specific aim. And I think not just through her, but through a lot of other publishers doing the same thing, that sort of happened. We did, over the 10 years from 2010 to 2020, the European literature was published a lot more in the UK, and there was a rising readership in translated fiction. There was always this mythical figure that 3% of fiction was translated fiction in the UK, 3% of sales. Sorry, 3% of books published.
Actually, can I stop you there?
Yeah.
We used to produce statistics on translated literature in the UK, and what we did was that we had a data feed from the British Library, and then we analyzed that. It's very laborious, but we came up with some figures, and so I always had the happy news that actually when it comes to translated fiction, it's more like 4.5% or 5%. But recently, disaster struck, and the British Library had a massive cyber attack, which actually really created a huge problem, and for them, for us, for users. And so we haven't been able to do anything with the little data that they now have available. So it's an extraordinary situation. But what is even more extraordinary is that nobody actually does this, producing statistics in the UK and also in the US, in English-speaking countries in general. And this is something that is generally done by like a national institution in all countries across Europe. So back to you, yeah.
But it was always said to be 3%, and that was what people said at parties, and I never really knew if it was true. But the most recent data that came out, I think, was 2022, 23, and it was the International Booker did a set of data, obviously partly to prove that the work that the International Booker are doing has made all this big difference. So it was self-serving, but also very useful. And they claim now that it's something like 6% and doubled, which the implication is that it's doubled through the work of, yes, prizes like the International Booker have made a big difference, but also the work of independent publishers, Pairini being among them under my predecessor.
Is that publishing or sales?
Publishing.
Publishing,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
this is the claim. This is the claim.
Yeah. I don't know where their figures come from. I mean, I know that they have, obviously they know what's being sold.
Yeah.
But when it comes to distribution, what's being distributed, that's so it may not be, if they're looking at what's being distributed, it may not be actually published in the UK. So anyway.
Sure. Anyway, I agree that. So I think that there was this real movement towards publishing more translated literature over, kind of, in the sort of last 15 years, and then in the last 4 or 5 years since I've taken over at Pairini, I am now part of the next wave, which is to say, yeah, we publish all this stuff from Europe, but what about all this other amazing literature all over the world? And that's what I've been doing since I took over at Pairini, is trying to think how we can expand our networks and how we can bring more languages into our list, but also into the UK publishing scene. We published a Thai book, actually, that's represented by Law's agency, and that, I think, was maybe the 4th or 5th Thai author in translation in the UK, given how important Thailand is to, like, the UK cultural imagination and the European cultural imagination. That's amazing. So there are lots of these gaps, and coming to these fellowships and stuff is part of that for us, because our networks were so kind of focused in Northern Europe particularly, and trying to find, the publishing cultures are so different, the publishing cultures all over the world are so different and quite alien to us, and trying to understand different ways of doing things and understand different publishing cultures has been kind of the work I've been doing for the last 3 years, so that we can expand our list. Because I think there is an appetite for translated fiction, particularly among younger readers of my generation. We were talking before, and before we came on stage, and I was reading that 50% of all translated fiction readers are under 35. That's the 50% of all translated books are read by people under 35. And that's certainly not in the UK, and that's certainly not half of the population is under 35. We're an aging culture, so that is quite striking, and that means that there is something there, that those people hopefully will keep reading translated fiction, and there is a real audience there to be developed alongside. So I think there is green shoots for translated fiction if there is a broader picture that's also a little bit more rocky. I'll stop there. Do you want to get that one? Or?
Yeah, that's fine. Hello, I am Jacoba from De Geus in the Netherlands. De Geus was founded 40 years ago with the mission. Well, in the Netherlands, the dominant culture was and is still the Anglo-Saxon culture, with the mission to bring to the Netherlands literature from all over the world, to open up our cultural and literary imagination. And what we have seen in the last 40 years is not that the readership is going down. I mean, the last 5 years are quite stable in the Netherlands in terms of how many books are bought, but in what people buy. And while I think 10 years ago or 15 years ago, people were very open to get to know the unknown, you can almost put it on a parallel with the political developments in the Netherlands. We read more Dutch, we read more what we know, and it's harder to bring not the Anglo-Saxon books, not the Scandinavian books, but the books from worlds that are less, less what we know. I think that's a bit of the essence. We publish 40 books a year, 20 books more or less are translated, and especially not from Anglo-Saxon culture, but also from all over the world and all over Europe. Yeah, that's a little bit what we see. The younger readers are interested in translated fiction, but would tend to read it in English in the Netherlands. About 20% of the books that are sold in the Netherlands are sold in English. So that's a real challenge for our market, because it's impoverished as what we are able to offer. I think it's a real challenge for English authors as well, because they get less revenues, less PR, less publications, and it's a real challenge for the reader as well, who is getting less of a diverse offer. So those are that's really a threat to translated fiction and non-fiction in the Netherlands. Yeah, not only in the Netherlands, in Germany, Scandinavia, the Netherlands, France. Sally Rooney as well was bought half, they say. Yeah.
It's a bit different.
Yeah. So that's in short the situation.
Thank you. So, hello everybody. Ricardo Lopez from Spain. I founded, together with my partner, Armani Editorial, like almost 10 years ago, with a clear focus, clear objective of translating literature from all over the world, trying to make accessible to the Spanish readers the culture and the language and the literature of really strong figures in their own countries, but because of one reason or the other, have not been yet translated into Spanish. So in these 10 years of existence, I mean, we are very small, and we publish just from 6 to 10 books per year. But we have built a catalog, in my opinion, very, very diverse, very open, and still very elite. You have called us a boutique publisher, but I wouldn't say that, because that gives the sense of I don't know, like high price or luxury good, but I don't think that is that is the issue.
Boutique is, I mean it in a very,
It,
very positive
I
way.
know, and I accept it like that. But it's like I think that the richness of the Spanish publishing market right now is very big. Okay, there are two big groups, like I think everywhere else, that dominate the market in 90% or 80% share. but still there are plenty of other small publishers in Spain that that gives a very diverse scenario of literature, world literature, and I think that's the reason the translated literature in Spain is like 20-25%, and I think it's bigger than in other countries, and and that is good. The diversity for the readers and for the culture in general. So we are little by little growing, and that means that there is an appetite for more translated literature, and especially from other countries that other than other cultures than Anglo-Saxon culture. And we hope that we continue this trend, and also especially in Latin America, where this trend is, in my opinion, it's advancing, and it's growing, and yeah, let's see how it develops in the following years.
Thank you. This was a good start, and I realized that actually in our discussions, we prior to the session, we didn't really address the role of the translator at all. And of course, translators are central to this, but also translators. And maybe you want to, say something on that subject, because the question is, how do you source your titles? You spoke about all these opportunities that are now open to publishers in the form of fellowships and going to book fairs, meeting publishers. But also, I don't know, for example, what role is played in this market by agents, because some countries really still don't have them, or have only started having agents representing their authors. And how much does to what extent do translators actually offer pitch books to you that you then decide to publish?
Okay, we work very closely with literary translators, and we've always done it. And I must to say that because we're in Greece, one of the first schools of translation in Europe has been founded in Athens in the late 80s for the relationship between France and French and Greek languages. I'm not sure it's still it's still working, I don't know. But in the late 80s, it has been very important. And I would say that, for example, with the English-speaking countries, and you probably confirm or not, I don't know, but we faced before a problem when we were presenting books to find publishers in UK or US. They said, okay, that's very interesting, but we don't have translators, and we cannot publish those books because of that. And in France, we are very lucky because we have this incredible institution, university, which is INALCO, Institut National des Langues et Civilisations Orientales, meaning that we have translators for every language in the world. I think there is not one language in which we don't have literary translator. I don't mean translators only, but literary translators trained for literary translation. And that's very, very useful. So translators are very important, and very often when we cannot read books, they are the one who propose authors. And even when we can read, we represent right now a Greek author, Makis Malafekas, and Makis is the French translator of Makis, who came to us and say, okay, Laure, you should have a look at Makis' works because it's very interesting. But it's a translator who came with this author. And that's how it happens very often, even for us in France. And I must say otherwise that we have one of our partners at the agency, Jérôme, who is living in Malaysia, who speaks a lot of languages from Southeast Asia. And that's very useful because he can read Chinese, he can read Thai, he can read Malay, he can read all, yeah, I know, it's quite exceptional. So it's useful. That's
Yeah, we don't take pictures from authors. We only take them from translators and agents. You have to be flexible with that sometimes. Like actually coming here, I realized that a lot of Greek authors don't have agents, and so we are talking to authors here, but on the basis that the reason that we don't take pictures from authors normally is that if we don't have a translator attached, we can't do the book. We need to know that the book is going to work in English with the translator who's already attached, because a book can be fabulous in its original language, but it's all, if for literary fiction particularly, it's all about the quality of the English.
I didn't say pictures from authors. I meant from translators. If I said authors,
No,
then
you
I
didn't.
don't
I'm
mean
just
to-
saying you
yeah,
didn't. I'm
exactly.
saying that.
I think that would be. I mean, yes.
But it happens all
authors
the
want to
time.
be translated, but I don't think they play such a role in
But
the
authors pitch all the time.
ecologies. They do.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Which is fine. I
Yeah,
get it.
yeah,
But
yeah.
they want to be translated.
Yeah.
They think that perhaps we have a Rolodex of translators who are ready to jump on as soon as we find a book, and we don't have that. We work with
That's
translators on a
interesting.
freelance
Yeah,
basis.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
and I do. Yeah, translators are clearly operating as agents
Yeah.
in some way
Yeah.
as well, particularly for kind of places where the agenting culture isn't so strong. And I do worry about, I know AI, as everyone, we've managed to avoid it so far, but I do worry about in a world where bits of the translation process are hived off to AI because we think, oh, we'll just do that bit on AI and then we'll find a translator for that. As soon as you start doing that, you start eating into all the little bits of work that fund translators' lives around when they're doing a big project, and the rest of their working life becomes more difficult because the process is becoming decoupled from, the book is being decoupled from them, and then these things need to be combined at an early process. You really need to know that we need to know that we've got the right translator for the book early on, and if we get an AI sample, I say I won't look at it until I have a translator attached. We can afford to do that because we're tiny, and we very much base ourselves on publishing very literary fiction, so we can afford to say, to kind of push back on that. But I do worry that the process is being slightly jeopardized in that way. Yeah.
What about the various foundations and national institutions that also come to book fairs and talk to publishers, and especially when it comes to publishers in the UK and English-speaking countries, they being translated into English is something that everybody wants to happen. So do you talk to them as well?
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
And I think it's very interesting. There's like so the UK is rubbish at offering grants and offering support to authors around the world. The British Council does a bit, but basically we know that we kind of don't need to, that our books get translated anyway. So, and then there are lots of countries that can't afford to do it. So it's really the countries that have the economic weight to do it, but not necessarily the cultural power, that are so good at doing it. So Finland are amazing at it, Denmark are amazing at it, the Netherlands are really good at it. And that actually is great, and I love working with them, and it makes it so much easier to do a book if you know that you can apply for funding. But you can see the concerted effort from certain foundations and institutes lead to a big boom in something and that there is this interesting thing where it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, that then people think, oh, the Catalan books, that's cool, Catalan books, I'm going to do more Catalan books. And suddenly there are loads and loads of Catalan books, and then there's a sort of a slew of them, and people a bit overwhelmed and have to go somewhere else. And so it's an interesting model, and I think it's great that it benefits those countries that can afford to do it. It does take away publishers' attention and money from the countries who can't afford to do it, and so I think there's a careful dance to be done there. you want to talk? Or another question, I don't know.
No, I think in general there's another problem, and it is in the readership as well as in our selection, is our concentration on a few titles. And this is one of the things that threatens also translating fiction, because more and more, especially after COVID, people go for the same 3 titles. Yeah, and sometimes we as publishers do the same at book fairs. We go for the same 3 or 4 titles, and it sometimes has to do with funding. It also has to do with a very professionalized agenting and creating hypes. So it's our duty, I think, as publishers to stay on the focus of the whole thing. But it's on both sides, I think. Yeah.
Can I say one more? There is also a very political dimension to it in terms of, so Argentina just cut its program of funding for translation a couple of years ago, and lots of publishers signed open letters about keeping it going, and Georgia, at the moment there's a boycotting of Georgia House, which is but what do? What we do is we say we want the funding and then when it doesn't come, we can't afford to, so I don't blame us really, but we don't then put our money where our mouth is and fund the Georgian book anyway ourselves, or support the Argentinian author anyway by ourselves. What we do is we go, well, if the government's not going to help us, sorry. So there is this uncomfortable political dimension to it, which I think about quite a lot. Yeah.
Going back to your initial question regarding translators, how important are work, I would say that they are absolutely central in 2 ways. Mainly, the most important way is the translation work. Actually, we consider translators as co-authors. So if the translation doesn't work as smoothly and as excellent as the original work, it makes no sense to publish it. So that's the main reason we put the maximum effort to find the translator. That means that the cost is of course higher because we are talking about in our catalog at least of minoritarian languages, so it's not easy to find the right translator, and that is the reason we need this support via translation grants and so on. The second aspect on why translators are central to our strategy is that we receive a lot of pitches from translators, not commercial pitches as another publisher or foreign publisher or an agency would do, but out of their own personal taste and of their own personal like of that specific work of art or work of fiction. And we have picked up many of these pitches from translators, because from really reliable and excellent translators, and we have been successful in that sense. So it's one of our main sources of pitching or picking up new titles for our catalog. The second would be like agents, like Astier Percher, for example, and the last of them would be other publishers from other countries that we swim into their catalogs and we find like real gems that are worth considering.
It's interesting that we have countries here or languages, target languages, that probably have translators from practically everywhere, every language. But there is that issue of what if there isn't a translator from that language. My organization is based in Wales, which means that we have books written in Welsh, and that's a tiny language that doesn't really have many speakers outside the country, and it's a real problem. So books that, you know, books can travel. Books written in Welsh can only travel if they are translated into English. So that's something that we have to invest in. But what's your view on bridge language translation? Do you ever need it, or how do you deal with it? Because it is a sensitive issue. It's done. There are some publishers here, specifically one I know about, who actually use translations to translate from without even declaring it, and without asking the translator, and so on and so on. So it is an issue that needs to be dealt with. It's sometimes the only way to get a translation, but it needs to be done really, correctly and sensitively, and with.
Okay, in our case, we always translate from the original language, but for 2 cases in our 50 plus catalog. One was Urdu from Pakistan, and we weren't able to find a good translator into Spanish, so we took over an English translation from the New York Review of Books, so we translated from there, and the second one was right now it's on the process of being translated.
You have been to the Chennai book fair.
Exactly.
Yeah, Chennai, the famous Chennai fellowship. Yeah. Everybody's looking for Tamil translators now. Yeah.
But I think we found a good solution. We're translating the book from English, but we have a Tamil consultant who would like adapt and refine the final translation. So it would be like a co-translation. This Tamil translator doesn't have skills in Spanish to provide a good translation, but she does have it. She does have it as a consultant or as a refiner of the final result of the final product. But the good thing is that in Spain we and in Latin America, of course, I include that, we have almost all languages represented and covered by translators. So I don't feel like we face that problem.
No, it's the same for us. We're lucky to have a very lively literary translation tradition and schools as well. And we've never published a translation which is not translated from the original. It's like one of the main missions, but yeah, we didn't have this case yet. So I don't know what we would do, but yeah,
It sounds like you're doing exactly the right thing. I think sometimes you're going to have to do it. I mean, if there's from our language is fine, but surely if we want Urdu books to be translated into Georgian as well, and Urdu books to be translated into Portuguese, and if there's not the right translator, as long as you have someone who speaks Urdu looking at the Urdu to English translation and making sure that those subtleties are carried into Portuguese, then we have to be open to the fact that you're going to have to do these things, and shouldn't be turn our nose up at it too much in our languages either if we're going to, So I think it sounds like you've got a good solution. I think we would do the same thing, yeah.
We just ask the author first. Some of them refuse, but usually they accept if they are sure that the team is perfect, so it happens.
Still, it's something that happens a lot. And for instance, famous authors like I don't know, Orhan Pamuk, his books have been translated mostly from translations into many languages. And the question is, you know, where does it leave the original translator, and should they maybe be remunerated every time this happens? Should it be referred to in the book? This is translated from the translation of such and such, and so on. And it doesn't always happen.
Yeah,
James.
My opinions on this issue of, so translators are in an interesting place at the moment where we haven't, for a long time they were sort of providing a service in the same way that a typesetter would, in that that's how publishers thought of them anyway. That's why you didn't have their name on the cover, and there was this conception that translators were just part of the process of but they weren't considered co-authors in the way that I completely do now. But this means that translators are in this funny space between being providers who are paid for a job and then it's over, and being artists who share in the success of the book if the book is successful. And I agree that they should, but I also think it's more complicated simply than translators should be offered royalties on everything from copy one and should be remunerated for every use of their translation afterwards, because I think they are in a different category to the author. And because they don't receive, we would pay an advance of less than we would pay to the translator to do the work. So we will pay the author less than we pay the translator for the book. And that is not an advance on royalties that a translator gets. It's a fee, and then there's royalties on top. And so I think there is a complicated thing with whether translators, we need to decide as a translated publishing culture where they quite fall, and we're still working it out, and it will be a bit complicated while we're working it out. Every time we do a contract, there's a new thing we have to think about, because there's, the translators talk to each other and learn things from each other, and so it is a...
Isn't it, because in the Netherlands there's like this general contract between the Publishers Association and the Translators Association, and if you're a literary translator, you get, for whatever language, the same advance and the same royalties. It's like something arranged, agreed on. Isn't it like that in UK? Oh, okay.
This is like a collective.
It's a collective, yes.
Collective
if you're a literary
agreement.
translator, you always
I think,
get...
Yeah, it exists in very few countries.
Oh, I thought it was...
Yeah, Norway is one. Yeah.
Oh, it's off, so...
So in Spain, we do have the freedom to negotiate advance, and so there's not a fixed advance or a fixed amount, but there is a general contract with translators that it's mandatory, and it obliges you to provide royalties.
So translators are part of the Society of Authors often in the UK, so it's a slightly different thing. And there are recommended rates to pay translators. There's a minimum recommended rate, which is what we pay, and we do have the rule that we don't pay more for different languages because we don't want to privilege one language over another. But the Society of Authors, when we go and ask them what they've advised translators, often they'll say, we just advise them to get as much as they can. We advise translators to bargain and get as much as they can, and some publishers will give you this and some won't, and so it's a more kind of Wild West situation. Yeah.
I suppose we can all agree that translators hold the copyright to their work, and they should be asked if that work is being used in any way whatsoever. So that's really what I'm referring to. It's no longer, I mean, at least in Europe, in the States, it still happens that it's considered work for hire, but I don't think this happens in Europe at all. In the rest of the world, still, translators face a lot of problems, and they work without contracts and so on. Anyway, let's stop here and let's ask the audience if they have any questions.
Hello, thanks for that. So I'm just wondering, in your different markets, I guess, I don't know how much you'll be able to speak to this, but whether with kind of like the rise of like readers reading in English, translated fiction into like local languages is being affected, and if there's like a prevalence of English language editions in your markets, and how that affects translators and translated literature in general.
But your question was specifically on translated fiction in the UK coming into English. In a, yeah, yeah, kind of. We pretend, yeah. Yeah.
So does that affect kind of local language? So translated,
Yes, a
yeah, rather
lot.
than, and you know, have you seen that that's more of an issue now than it was like a few years ago?
Yes, yes, it's definitely a big issue. It's an issue for in the first movement. It was especially people writing. For instance, we published Bernardine Evaristo. Her work being sold, yeah, about not double, but in substantial amounts. But we also published, for instance, Olga Tokarczuk, and she is sold half in English, half in Dutch. So yes, it makes us think twice, or maybe even more than twice, about everything which has been published in English, if it's still worthwhile to publish it in the Netherlands, if it's possible to compete with it, because there are wonderful English independent publishers, and a few are very loved as well in the Netherlands, like Fitzcarraldo, which has wonderful editions. But if you go to the main bookshop in Amsterdam, there's this whole wall of Fitzcarraldo editions with books we publish as well, and we sell 200 copies, and they sell. So it's it's we have to find a new equilibrium, and I do think it's important. Agents know how important it is because it's worse for everyone except UK publishers. But there's not a bigger conversations from agents with especially the big groups in the UK of how we can address this. I mean, people should read in whatever language, whatever genre, so it's not that we are obliged to stick to our own language, but we have to think of how this will not threaten the diversity of publications, and also, I mean, if we stop publishing translated authors, they won't appear in the newspaper in the Netherlands because the English publisher is not putting any effort in PR, an author's visit. But when we have an English author coming over to the Netherlands, we see at the end of a speech 2/3 of the copies sold in English, so, and not shared by the English publisher in the PR costs. So it's, yeah, it's a challenge. Yeah, it is.
I must say that in Spain that is not an issue because although there's a growing portion of the population that speaks English, most of sales are in Spanish or regional languages, Catalan, of course, Basque, etc. So the sales of books in English is like quite negligible, so it's not an issue.
I heard yesterday a Greek publisher complaining about that, and I think in France, I never heard any publisher complaining because I'm afraid the English language in France is not so good. Maybe with the first generation, the young generation is changing a little bit. For the first time in Paris, for the last Paris Paris Book Market, Book Festival, I've seen some huge American bestsellers on the tables in English. and young people buying those bestsellers. But I think it's not yet an issue, but maybe it will be in a few years. I don't know.
I don't have huge amounts to say on this, but we sell our books into Europe a little bit. We sell directly into Europe as much as we can, although it's harder after Brexit. Direct sales, it's still fine really through distributors, because our distributors have fairly robust ways of selling books into Europe. I totally sympathize with the idea that if you publish a book in Dutch, if you publish an English author in Dutch, and you put money into it, and then the benefits are equally shared with the English publisher, or even more so, that's an incredibly frustrating situation. Have you considered publishing, like buying the English language rights?
Yeah, we have in 2 cases. We have in the past. It's getting more and more difficult. We now had the situation that actually the UK publisher threatened the agent of cancelling the deal if we would publish a non-exclusive English edition, so non-exclusively. We've never published exclusively. It worked in the case of Quentin Tarantino, because he added his own chapter on Amsterdam. He came over, so that we sold quite a lot. And I mean, our distribution is better because our salespeople go around the country every day. The UK salespeople come over twice a year, so we are able to reach the whole country instead of 2 bookshops in Amsterdam. So it could work, but it's not. It's not the final solution neither. We should have the conversation. I think it would be interesting to address it, maybe with several countries, have the conversation and how it could work for all of us, because I think in the end the author would benefit, so the rights department would benefit as well. So there is something to be done there, but we're like a bit paralyzed, all of us. Yeah. We're now in the situation of this is mine, don't touch it. Yeah. I think we should go beyond that and think about it.
It might just be a fashion. Maybe it's cool.
No.
You don't think?
No, I do understand. I mean, they're cheaper, they're earlier on the market. It's often also in genre fiction, and the English editions are more fancy. So I don't think it's a fashion that will go away. And in a way, it's interesting as well for Dutch people to read in English, because it is a gateway to a more international world. So, no, I think it's something we will have to face more professionally than what we are doing now. Yeah.
And it's true for translation too, for books translated into English. For example, if we have a novel translated into English and we present it to Scandinavian publishers, they say, oh no, if there is an English translation, we won't pay a translation in Scandinavian language because it exists in English already. Yeah. So it's true for translated books too.
Exactly. And it's a pity for the author, because they won't get the press attention or an invitation to festivals. Yeah.
I think we're being told to stop.
I think we have to wrap up now. To leave some space between the 2 sessions. I'd like to thank the speakers. I'd like to thank the Thessaloniki Book Fair, Nopi Hazioriou, particularly for putting together this wonderful program. And if you want to find out more about where to look for works written in Arabic, there is a session at 1 o'clock here with Olivia Snej and her colleague Gabrielle, who will present this very interesting platform where you can find a lot of information about Arabic literature. That's it. Give the speakers a round of applause. Thank you very much.